And joining me right now in the studio is Owen Alterman, a research fellow from the Institute of National Security Studies. Good evening.
Good evening, Lucy.
So, you see, we hear that some optimism, some not, about what is going on between the Palestinians and the Israelis. But in this whole process, although John Kerry called Bibi my friend, and Bibi called him my friend, and he called him Bibi, everybody's still talking about the gap between the United States and Israel. So is it a real gap, or is it just the business is continue as usual?
No, it's definitely a real gap.
Okay.
But I wouldn't necessarily say that the friendly front is necessarily hiding a more acrimonious meeting. It's very possible that they had a conversation that was friendly and that both sides are trying to reduce the tensions even behind the scenes. I think both sides have a lot to gain from coming to an agreement, coming to an understanding, because the alternative could be sometime next year a really ugly fight in Congress between the administration and the Israeli government, and I don't think either side wants that.
So either side don't want that, but there were reports that Israel concerns are no longer play a role in Washington conclusion. What could Israel do to make its voice heard again?
Well, Israel's ultimate leverage here is through its friends in Congress. That's really the bottom line. And that's why in the background of these talks is the potential for a fight on Capitol Hill. Again, I don't know that we'll get there because I think both sides really don't want to go there and would much prefer to come to an understanding between the administration and the Netanyahu government that would avoid something like that. But the administration has to negotiate with the Netanyahu government because they want to avoid some kind of attempt by Israel's friends in Congress at the end of this 6-month period in the interim agreement from Geneva, either to reimpose some sanctions or to refuse to lift sanctions that would be required to be lifted under a final deal. The bottom line is Obama will need Congress's help and will need Congress's support and won't be able to implement his policy over congressional opposition, so they'll want to deal with Bibi.
You know, but Benjamin Netanyahu is not actually stopping his warning against Iran. He's not stopping his yelling, listen, this is a bad deal. And yet the United States is not hearing it because what? Because the United States is saying, okay, we're fed up. We cannot hear these shouts anymore.
I don't think it's an emotional issue. I think it may be some divergence of interests. What Secretary Kerry said today is that both sides share the ultimate goal in these talks. And of course, both sides would very much prefer that Iran come to the table, wipe its hands clean, and say it's ready to get rid of its entire nuclear program. I don't think anyone believes that's about to happen. So really the devil is in the details. And where is the American red line of what the United States is willing to live with? And where is Israel's red line? And as we've talked about for the last 2 or 3 years, those red lines may be in different places. Not because there's not goodwill between the two sides, but just because they have different interests. And the question is, even considering those different interests, can the U.S. administration and the Israeli government come to a common understanding, and will that understanding be acceptable to the Iranians? Can all of these 3 parties be on the same page or not? That's really the open question, and I think there's an attempt to get everyone there.
Before we're finishing, do you think there is any reason to be worried about these tense relationships?
Well, listen, I think for the time being, I think for the next couple months, we'll see a period of calming down and of trying to reduce the tensions. There's an Israeli team on its way to Washington from the security establishment to talk to the administration, try to express Israel's concerns, and try to have a give and take and see where people can go. We'll have to see in 6 months where we're at and see if we can avoid what I fear would be a really ugly fight on the Hill.
Let's hope not. Owen Alterman, thank you very much for this.
My pleasure.